They're like, oh yeah, guy with Pensy Steam comes in every once in a while. They're not really much. Really test the LED in the headlight, but we'll take this at 10. Proceed to 15. Hey everybody, this is Pensy Joe here, back again, and today we're going to do another train talks, and this time we're going to talk about possible, well, let's just say top 5 locomotives that I would like to see that are diesel to be produced by Broadway Limited. And it's going to be an interesting lineup. Some people might like it, some people might not like it. And I really wanted to make this because I feel like Broadway is really lacking in the diesel market in terms of Generation 1 diesels in particular. I really think that they really got the market, by the groin, when it comes to the steam engines and some of the Generation 1 diesels that they've made so far. And I would really love to see them make a whole lot more in the years to come. And today we're going to discuss, the top 5 that I've mentioned of the locomotives that we would like to see. It's particularly me, actually, but I'm pretty sure a lot of other people would like to see to be produced by Broadway Limited Imports. Without further ado, let's get started. Number 5. Now, some people might already know what this locomotive is. You might have seen a particular YouTuber by the names of Darth Santa Fe doing a kit bashing model that looks rather similar to this model right here. And if you're not sure what this model is, and you're new, and you probably not have seen that video by that particular YouTuber, this is a Baldwin Locomotive Works DR 4-4 1500. This is a 4-axle truck diesel. Now, this diesel looks rather similar. If you see those two, if you see those vents and the top back of the locomotive, they look rather similar to the shape of those seen on the Baldwin RF-16s that Broadway has already made. Interesting enough, this is the exact predecessor. Now, you might think, well, this looks a lot like an EMD diesel. You're right. Hence why these locomotives were nicknamed the baby faces. Now, the baby faces were not really known well for their quality and all that. However, one of the most famous babyface diesels was the Baldwin Centipedes. And I don't want to butcher the name of their, Baldwin designation number, but we're going to call them the Centipedes still. So these guys were pretty much the 4-axle workhorses on a number of railroads, primarily on the New Jersey Central and the New York Central, and a couple other small railroads as well. I thought they'd be very interesting because, as you can see, they have been made already in brass, but they have not been made, in mass production yet. And I really think they would be a really good, Generation 1 diesel for Broadway to make because they probably can use the same chassis as the RF-16s that they already produce and just have a different shell on top of them. It might not be 100% the same, but I think if they just do minor adjustments to the frame of the RF-16s, they can definitely make the RF-16s and these at the same time, and therefore we have more variety of diesels in the market. Number 4. Now you're probably already wondering, hold on, we already saw a baby face, and you're indeed correct. We did see another baby face. And we're seeing another one, and this is a different baby face. As you can tell, the truck arrangement is a 6-axle truck. Now, these are roughly around the same size as an Alco PA, probably slightly smaller, or maybe around the same size. I can't really tell 100% sure. I'd have to have them side by side. However, these Baldwins were designated as DR 6-4 1500s. Now, these locomotives were, again, rather a failure, the baby faces, and These locomotives have been wanted by a couple of model railroaders that I know about, and specifically they want the seaboard ones since the seaboard ones are rather more well known, and they've been rather worked on the seaboard for quite a while before they were finally retired and scrapped. And unfortunately, nobody has made these in brass. Nobody has absolutely made these in brass that I've know or seen, especially if you go on the brasstrains.com, right? I almost said brass basement, but really brasstrains.com, who has a plethora of trains on there that are brass for multiple years in the past. They have not had any DR6-4-1500s. And it's a shame because you can only find those in like resin kits, or you have to kit bash them or make them hand scratched, which is rather a shame because as you could see the New York Central, and before you could see the Seaboard one. And I'm pretty sure there were a couple other railroads as well that had these 6-axle locomotives. And I really think they should make them since none of them have been made physically in model format. Yeah, I really think Broadway should make this as the if they do make the DR4-4 1500s or the babyface sharks or the babyface RF's locomotives, if you would think that to be the correct term, I guess. I think that would be cool to have the 6-axle version. I really do think, and that's why I think it's the number 4 spot right here for these diesels. Number 3. Out of a lot of locomotives that we have on this top 5 list, this locomotive has probably been on more railroads than any of them on this list, including the top 1. So you're probably wondering, why do I have the Fairbanks Morris Erie built in number 3? Now, let's be honest here. Who else has made the Fairbanks Morris Erie builds? The only one that's more modern than the rest that I can think of is the Lifelike Proto 1000 version that they came out around 20 years ago or more. And it's kind of insane that Walthers hasn't made these yet. Now, they have different windshields depending on the roads, but this is a really cool looking diesel. And these were pretty much the predecessors for the base of the Alco PAs. And you would think these were more well known and that they would be more mass produced, but unfortunately that just isn't the case. And that's rather a shame in my opinion because they really deserve another chance to be brought back in the model format. I mean, if you've looked at like a lot of modelers, they've had them for the Pennsylvania Road, the New York Central, they've had them for Milwaukee, as you can see in the photo, and they've had them in other models as well. They also make these models in brass and numeral road names as well, and I believe a couple of manufacturers in brass have made these. So it makes you wonder, why hasn't anybody made a modern version yet? Yes, there were failures, but so was the Centipedes, and yet Broadway makes them. So I think that this has a really solid chance to coming back, and I really think Broadway should make these also. Number 2. The DL109s and DL110s are one of those models that, again, I wonder why nobody has made these again. I know that the F units and the Alcos are rather popular, but if you're going to do a lot of Alcos and EMDs, why not do one of the first? And one of the first is the DL109s and the DL110s, which are the B units to the DL109A units. A number of roads had these models, and to be honest, it's rather strange that not a lot of people have made these. And they're great to do fantasy schemes, and that goes for all the models in this lineup that Broadway can do, since Broadway's trying to do more of the Lionel route of doing, fantasy scheme models. And diesels are rather inoffensive when it comes to doing fantasy schemes. In this case, the DL109 has been made for the Santa Fe, the New Haven, the Rock Island, and a couple other railroads that I cannot name the top of my head, but I've seen in other formats. And there's only a few brass manufacturers that have made these models. including Hallmark, as we see right here. And the only other time that we really seen these models is again, when Lifelike got turned into Walthers. Walthers has made the DL109, and they only made the A unit. They didn't make the DL10, not 1010, but 110 as the B unit. They haven't made a B unit, which I think is strange because it's like, why make the A unit and not make the B unit? I mean, they made both of these. Sure, the B unit was not as made as much as the A unit, but still, they both exist. And I really think that Broadway should take the opportunity to make accurate models of the DL109 and DL110. It's just a no-brainer. Honorable mentions. Once you start talking about Alcos like the DL109, you can't help but mention the more later and more successful Alcos, such as the FA2 and also the FA1, even though we have a picture of an FA2. The FA2 was produced by Walthers, Rapido, and MTH. Since MTH is out of the game, there's really nobody else making them currently. Rapido has made them recently, and so has Bachmann a couple years before that. But it would be really interesting to see if Broadway can make something cool with Alcos again. Since we're talking about Alcos, the Alco PA is another model that Broadway should also bring back, since they used to make them during the PCM days. They also made them in N scale, however we haven't seen them ever since for a very long time, and it would be really interesting to see if they make these in HO again. Since Rapido has made pretty much probably the best Alco PAs on the market, I would argue it's not really the best idea to try and compete with that at this moment in time, and maybe wait a couple years down the road if they really want to do more Alcos and other types of diesels as well, in terms of the Alco range that has been produced already by, the likes of Walthers, Rapido, and a couple other companies. And finally, we're going to talk about the EMD SD70. This is a model that a lot of people really want Broadway to make because they only made these in N scale, and it's rather strange they have not made them in HO. Preferably, in my opinion, I would not really want to see any more modern diesels from BLI. And the reason is why would you buy them, right? Now you probably wonder, well, I already bought some. And it's like, well, why did you buy them? Because there's better brands out there that offer you a really good model, a reliable model that's going to be more reliable than a Broadway model. And it could be easier to work with any of the other models and brands because you can have interchangeable electronics. But Broadway, you're stuck with the electronics you have unless you hardwire them. And therefore it costs extra money and extra time. And, more skills but it's a good amount of skills to learn if you want to change them. And it's true that Broadway, I really do understand why they do Generation 1 diesels. And I know everyone likes them and whatnot, but I don't think Broadway should be getting into the more modern Gen 2 through current diesel, generations, because that's not really their main market. Their main market really is the older steam era and early diesel era stuff. And I really think they should stick to that niche because a lot of people still like to do steam. For example, I'm a young guy and I still like to do steam. And I know lots of other people that are young that want to do old era steam. There might not be as many as the older folk that are out there that still like to do, what they remember or, when they were a kid or when their grandparents, remembered or their fathers or parents remembered. So I really find it interesting that Broadway wants to branch out to the modern diesel market in the past couple of years. To me, it makes no sense because they're trying to compete with other companies like the likes of Scale Trains and Athearn Genesis and Walthers even for these high premium models. But it's like why do you try to compete with these guys? They already got the market locked down. You don't really need to tap into another market if your electronics are not on par, if not interchangeable like the other models in the market are. It just makes no sense, And that's why I really think that Broadway should stay away from the modern diesel market if they're going to continue with their Paragon stuff. And if anybody knows my channel, I don't really like Paragon. I don't really like their old QSI kind of like, stuff. So, yeah, it's a good mention because I know a lot of people want it, and that's why it's in my honorable mentions. However, I do think other models like that I already have in this list already are more worthy to be produced since Broadway already fits the old niche, such as this one coming up next. Number 1. Hold on a second. Broadway has already made the RF-16, the 4-axle. Wait a minute. This is a 6-axle. And indeed, you're correct. This is a 6-axle shark nose. Well, what kind of shark nose is this? Well, guys, this is the BP-20, or in later terms, they were named as BF-16s, which were different. And they also had the other designation as DR-64-2000. Interesting names, right? Well, the BP-20s are a rather interesting model. They were pretty much the first shark noses that came out from Baldwin. And it's a shame that nobody has really made these. Yes, they were kind of failures. But they were used pretty extensively on the Pennsylvania Railroad. Yes, these locomotives were primarily on the Pennsylvania Railroad, and they were not used really pretty much anywhere else. These were specifically for the Pennsylvania Railroad. And you might think, well, what's the point of this if you can't make a lot of road names out of it? Well, that's where you're wrong. As we've learned from the past locomotives we saw in this list, you can do fantasy schemes for these models, and it would be really cool to see a lightning stripe of this model. Now, another reason why I would really want this model to be seen made by Broadway is because they already made the RF-16. It would be really cool if they made the 6-axle sharks, just like how they make the E units, which are 6-axle, basically F units, but longer. These Baldwins were around the same size as an SD-80 in their day. They were ginormous. They were huge. They were huge sharks. Like, they were as big as a modern diesel. They were not that much shorter than a centipede. So it'd be really cool to see these made in HO. And I really think, it's going to be a very sought-after model as a plastic-bodied diesel locomotive. Or it could be made as a brass hybrid. A brass hybrid diesel would be pretty cool as well, since it's rather, limited in how many road names that it had in real life. It was only really for the Pennsylvania. And they can make multiple variations. They can have two headlights on the locomotive. They can have the single stripe. They can have the BF-16 version, BP-20. It doesn't matter. And it's also a unique twin prime mover Baldwin locomotive. So that's really the pros of why this would be a really cool model on the market. It's very unique. It's really cool. It's very large. And it would be a really good complement to the RF-16 in Broadway's tooling. These models have only been made in brass, and the only accurate ones in brass, there's only 2 companies that made these in brass. Oriental Limited makes the as accurate as possible versions that they made of the BP-20s and BF-16s. And as you can see, these are big diesels. Like, they're huge. They're fuel tanks. Man, that fuel tank setup looks like it's as large as a modern diesel, and those 6-axles looks as large as a modern diesel. However, they were passenger, and they were later used in freight services. It's very interesting that, nobody else has made these ever since. And some people are like, well, they were too obscure. I beg to differ. They were pretty much as obscure as the RF-16s, if not a little bit more obscure, but the reason why it's number 1 spot is because we already have the RF-16. These have been made in brass, but these are really highly sought after, and I really think these would be really, really popular models on the market, and it'd be really cool to see them in fantasy schemes as well. Again, it's just one of those models that you're like, man, I'd really love to have that if I didn't have to spend like 400 or more dollars for the brass version and then work on it to make it, modernized. Anywho, that's the end of this really fun, kind of short, kind of, it's not the most well put together, but I thought it would be something different for this week's train talks. And I haven't done a train talks in a while, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And leave a like if you want. Share this with other people if you want. Maybe try and get Broadway's attention. That would be really great to try and get Broadway's attention with this. Because I'm pretty sure a lot of us modelers want to see more variety in the diesel market instead of, just same SD40s, all the modern diesels that everybody else pretty much makes already. And I thought this would be a great start to like give some ideas out there. Anywho, this is all I got to say. This is Pensy Joe signing out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye now.